Hey guys, tonight we're slipping quietly into a world of dust, incense, and whispered prayers. You're standing barefoot in the sandy threshold of a mud brick home in ancient Egypt, just as the sun begins to drop behind the palms lining the Nile. The heat hasn't broken yet. Flies drone lazily in the air, the same way they've probably done for 5,000 years. Inside the home, a woman is about to give birth. There's no hospital, no sterile gloves, no pain relief, and honestly, no guarantee she'll survive the night. You probably won't survive this either. Not if you were her. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and the local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge deeper into the village, the soles of your feet dusted with the kind of ancient dirt that never washes off. Not that anyone here minds. This is normal. This is childbirth, Egyptian style. It's not a quiet affair. Inside one house, you hear a low rhythmic chant, words older than the pyramids, punctuated by strained breathing and the occasional involuntary shout. You wince. Someone's having a baby and everyone within earshot knows it. You step past a tethered goat who gives you a side eye that seems almost judgmental. It smells like sun-warmed dung, crushed barley, and sweat here. Welcome to a delivery scene circa 1400 BCE. This is not the clean-cut Hollywood version of ancient Egypt. Forget the gold and eyeliner for a moment. Right now, it's about survival. Women in this time are strong, but that doesn't mean they get through childbirth easily. Far from it. Even with their gods, their rituals, and their surprisingly inventive tools, the odds are grim. Some records estimate maternal mortality hovered somewhere around 1 in 10. That's like playing Russian roulette with papyrus and prayers. A laboring woman in ancient Egypt usually squats or kneels sometimes on bricks called birth bricks. Not the cushy birthing pools of modern times, nope. These are actual rectangular blocks placed on dirt floors and occasionally decorated with protective spells. You try sitting on one and immediately regret it. Very ergonomic for a pot. Surrounding her are women midwives, friends, sometimes sisters. There are no doctors here. Medicine is a man's world mostly, and childbirth is considered too unclean for them. So the women handle it all, from first contraction to cutting the cord with a copper blade. One of them is muttering a hymn to Taweret, the hippo-shaped goddess of childbirth. She's terrifying to look at, honestly. Giant belly, lion limbs, a crocodile tail, but that's kind of the point. She scares away the evil spirits that are believed to cause pain and death during birth. A clay amulet shaped like her dangles from the ceiling, swinging like a pendulum. You duck so it doesn't bop you in the forehead. In the corner, someone's grinding herbs with a stone pestle, possibly to dull the pain, possibly to keep the demons out. It's hard to tell. That's one of the wild things about this era. Medicine and magic are basically the same thing. You offer to help, and the midwife hands you something sticky and brown. Date paste, maybe. Or possibly dung. You don't ask. This isn't your first birth tonight. You've been moving from house to house, seeing the same rhythm play out at the slow build-up, the pleading to the gods, the sweat-soaked desperation. And if things go well, the high-pitched squawk of a new life. If things go poorly, it gets quieter. Much quieter. Historians still argue whether women gave birth alone with just one helper or in a full-on village gathering. Some texts mention 3 women, some only 1 midwife. Others suggest a ceremonial group effort, especially among the wealthier class. You peer through a doorway and see what looks like a noblewoman biting down on a piece of cloth, flanked by attendants with perfumed cones melting on their wigs. Childbirth, but make it fashion. You watch her grip a braided linen rope hanging from the ceiling, bracing herself as the pain surges. No epidural, obviously, just sheer grit and the occasional prayer shouted through clenched teeth. One woman offers her beer. Yes, beer. It wasn't just a drink for chilling by the Nile. It was also used medicinally. It dulls the edge, or at least gives the illusion of dullness. Quirky fact, ancient Egyptian birthing spells were sometimes written on the belly of a figurine, which would then be worn hugged or buried under the birthing bricks. One particularly odd spell involved threatening the fetus with abandonment if it didn't cooperate. That's one way to motivate labor. Outside kids play in the dust completely unbothered. Life and death are woven into the same day here. There's no emergency siren, no frantic dash to a hospital. Just the sounds of women working together, determined not to lose another one. And always in the background, that soft rustle of palm fronds and buzzing flies, as indifferent to human struggle as the Nile itself. You move toward a fire pit where hot water is being prepared, not for pain relief or for washing the baby after birth, and maybe the tools if someone remembers. Sanitation is negotiable. A blade sits on a flat stone heating in the sun. It'll be used to cut the umbilical cord. If you're lucky, it'll be cooled first. If not, well, you do what you can with what you've got. You glance up and spot a vulture circling overhead, not ominous necessarily. In fact, in some cases, vultures were symbols of motherhood. The goddess Mut wore one on her headdress, protective and regal. Go figure, your modern brain sees a death bird, but there saw divine maternal instinct. As twilight falls, the chants grow louder, more urgent. You step back into the birthing hut just in time to see the baby emerge, slick, wriggling, furious at being born. A second later, the mother lets out a ragged cry of relief. That's half joy, half collapse. She made it. This time. The midwife wraps the baby in linen, then dabs kohl around the newborn's eyes, partly for protection, partly because, hey, it's Egypt. You gotta have flair. As you exhale, maybe for the first time in minutes, you realize your palms are slick with sweat. The birthing room's walls pulse with heat, the smell of blood and clay hanging heavy. You step outside the dry night air, a slap of cool clarity. Another life has begun. Another woman has survived, for now. You're barely catching your breath from the last delivery when a wiry woman in a blue linen shawl grabs your arm and pulls you toward another home. This one, smaller, darker, and reeking faintly of myrrh and burning reeds. She's been laboring since dawn, the woman hisses. The baby's turned sideways. You duck under the low doorway and blink. Inside, the air is thick and smoky. Candles flicker in every corner, their flames straining upward like they're trying to escape. In the center, a woman lies on a woven mat, her belly tight as a drum, her face slick with sweat. She doesn't scream, she groans long and low like the Nile in flood season. The room is set up like a miniature temple. A figurine of the goddess Taweret sits on a shelf above the doorway, watching with beady hippo eyes. She's got the legs of a lion, a bulging pregnant belly, and the tail of a crocodile. No offense, but she's not exactly comforting to look at. Still, her presence matters. Taweret guards the mother's womb, snarling away demons that sneak in during labor, which, according to the belief at the time, happens often. A midwife kneels near the mother, whispering into her ear between contractions. She's got the practiced calm of someone who's done this more times than she can count. She mutters prayers not just to Taweret, but also to Bes, the dwarf god of humor music, and you guessed it, childbirth. You wouldn't expect that combo, but there he is, carved into a wooden amulet, tongue out, dagger in hand, knees bent in a perpetual dance move. It's both ridiculous and oddly comforting. You ask quietly why. Bes, the midwife, shrugs. He scares off evil, and sometimes a woman needs laughter to push out life, which is fair, though you doubt many women are laughing mid-contraction. The room shudders slightly with the sound of a sistrum being shaken. It's a sacred rattle used in temple rituals, but it's also been co-opted into the birth room. Maybe to call divine attention, maybe just to drown out the screaming. A second midwife arrives with a bowl of water and a clay pot filled with dark, pungent herbs. She waves the smoke under the laboring woman's nose, trying to wake her from the exhausted fog that set in. The smell hits you like a wall bitter peppery, a little like old socks mixed with honey. Delicious. The labor isn't progressing. That's obvious. The baby's stuck and the mother's strength is fading. A girl, barely a teenager, kneels by her side and fans her face with palm fronds, murmuring, "Push, mother, push." The family paces outside barefoot in the sand, praying loudly enough that you can hear it through the walls. One fringe remedy gets brought out now, a clay figurine wrapped in red thread placed under the woman's feet. The midwives chant a spell, something about opening the pathway, inviting the baby to descend like the lotus at dawn. Historians still argue whether such spells were literal magic or simply metaphors meant to calm the mother and focus her mind. But in that moment, the figurine feels vital, like an extra set of hands reaching out from the spirit world. Suddenly, a sharp cry tears through the room, not from the mother, but from the midwife. "It's turned," she exclaims. "The baby is turning." Everyone starts moving at once. The candles flicker as if in celebration. The laboring woman cries out louder now, with the guttural strength of someone pushed past her edge and somehow still climbing. The midwives brace her back, holding her upright. A rope hangs from the ceiling and she pulls herself forward with each push. You're handed a damp cloth and told to wipe her brow, though your hands are shaking just trying to hold it. You feel like a very unqualified intern in a sacred ceremony no one warned you about. Finally, with a wet, sucking sound, the baby emerges. Blue at first, frighteningly silent. One midwife clears its nose and mouth with a quick swipe, then thumps it once, twice, until the room is pierced by a wail, a high, angry, life-affirming wail. There's no applause. Just exhausted smiles and silent thanks to Taweret Bez and probably anyone else who happened to be listening. The baby is wrapped in linen, the placenta buried outside near a fig tree, where it's believed it can protect the newborn's soul. And then comes a strange moment: laughter. The mother laughs. It's thin and shaky, but it bubbles up out of her like steam. One of the midwives makes a lewd joke about Bess and his stubby little legs, and the whole room joins in giddy with relief. You laugh too, mostly because it feels safe to breathe again. Some historians think that women's rituals during childbirth were the most potent form of domestic power they held. In these smoky rooms, away from the men and the scribes and the pharaohs, women ran the show. Life passed through their hands. You begin to understand why gods were shaped like hippos and dwarves, symbols of strength, absurdity, and the primal mess of creation. You step outside for a moment, needing air. The night is fully here now. Stars sprawl across the black sky like spilled barley. Someone hands you a cup of warm beer, thick and yeasty. You take a sip, gag slightly, then pretend it's fine. A dog trots past, indifferent. In another house, you hear a new set of groans rising. Someone else is in labor. The gods are going to be busy tonight, and so are you. You're not sure how long you've been here now, hours. Days, time melts in this heat and worry. Another woman, another birth, another sacred mess. This time you're led to a house just beyond the date palms where an older woman with a moon-round belly sits on a stool, sweating profusely and gripping her thighs like they owe her money. She's been laboring for what feels like forever. A midwife with a sun-scorched face whispers, "It's a breach." You flinch instinctively because even with all the incantations, beer and divine assistance, a breech birth here is nothing short of a nightmare. You glance down at the clay birth bricks, those same humble platforms that have seen it all. She's propped up on two of them, knees apart, trying to keep calm, while another midwife positions herself behind her, trying to coax the baby's legs down. This is going to be rough. Birthing bricks weren't just functional, they were symbolic. Painted sometimes with hieroglyphs or tiny murals, they often bore protective symbols: the eye of Horus cobras or frogs, because nothing says sacred motherhood like amphibians. You can just make out one faded inscription, "May the child slip out like a fish in the Nile." Honestly, that's a best case scenario. The woman groans again, but this time she stops halfway through. Her breath hitches. Not good. The midwife calls for beer. Not a joke, actual beer. Strong, homemade, and served warm. It's one of the oldest pain relievers in Egyptian history. You take the clay cup, pass it to the woman, and she drinks like it's the only kindness the world has left. Then someone begins to chant, not in fear, but in rhythm. It's a song to soothe the gods, and possibly the midwives too. You hum along quietly, pretending you know the words. Let the womb open as the lotus blooms. Let the path be smooth as silver. Nice sentiments considering what's about to happen. One of the midwives reaches for a flat tool made of bronze and curved like a ladle. A childbirth implement possibly used to guide the baby out, or maybe to steady the mother's hips. Historians still argue whether these tools were for support for leverage or just symbolic additions to the ritual. You'd rather not see it used either way. Now the baby's legs are visible. One little foot kicks as if annoyed by all the fuss. You try not to think about what happens if the head gets stuck. There's no surgical option, no emergency evacuation. If things go badly, they just go badly. You breathe slower as if your calm might somehow reach her through the air. Suddenly, the woman pushes hard and roars like she's calling down a storm. The baby slides free with a wet thump that silences the room. Another wail rises, a tiny defiant cry. You exhale so fast your head spins. The midwives get to work cleaning both of them. A bit of linen, a sprinkle of natron on the umbilical stump, and oddly enough, a dab of honey on the newborn's lips. Some say it welcomes sweetness into life. Others think it's just the ancient version of a pacifier. You're asked to help clean up. The tools go into a bowl of cool water mixed with herbs, possibly antiseptic, though honestly it smells like salad dressing gone bad. You wipe off one of the birthing bricks, noticing a crack that runs down the center. Symbolic, maybe. Probably just old. Then someone mentions offerings. You follow the midwives outside to a small shrine, really just a niche in the wall, with soot, blackened bricks, and a few crude carvings. They place fresh bread and dried figs at the base, along with a small cup of milk, and of course another splash of beer. These are for the gods to thank them for a successful birth. No one dares skip this step. In a wealthier household, you'd be seeing more elaborate offerings. Meat, incense, maybe even gold trinkets if the family is really high up. But here, even a crust of barley bread feels precious. You watch the steam rise from the food and wonder if the gods ever actually show up to snack. Probably not. But hey, customs are customs. A midwife shows you the worn pages of a birthing scroll. It's made of papyrus, brittle at the edges with ink, so faded it looks like it was sneezed onto the page. It lists the signs of good and bad omens during childbirth, how the baby faces, how long the labor lasts, whether the umbilical cord forms a knot. Some things still feel awfully familiar. You point at a symbol that looks like a coiled snake next to a tiny handprint. The midwife squints, then says with total seriousness, "If the baby grabs the cord before crying, the gods are displeased." You blink. What happens then? She shrugs. More offerings. Quirky fact, time beer wasn't just for numbing pain, it was also part of fertility magic. Some couples believe that drinking a beer brewed during a full moon with crushed pomegranate seeds could improve their chances of conception. No word on success rates, but it definitely made them more enthusiastic. As the family gathers to welcome the new child, you hover near the edge, trying not to intrude. A neighbor brings a gift, a scrap of embroidered linen, and a carved toy cat. The baby will be swaddled and fed, assuming the milk comes in soon, and that's a whole other gamble. The mother looks exhausted but triumphant, cradling the infant like a tiny treasure. Her hair sticks to her forehead in damp strands, and her eyes, oh, her eyes are already checking to make sure the baby breathes with every second. You realize then this isn't just about surviving birth, it's about surviving what comes after. As the moon rises higher, you wander back toward the midwife's quarters, your feet dragging through the sand. A donkey brays in the distance. Someone drops a jar. Life keeps moving. And somewhere, a pregnant woman turns over in her sleep a few weeks from needing you again. The sky's a softer blue now, pale and early when a curious young scribe waves you over to his tiny clay tablet-strewn nook beside the temple wall. You want to see the manual? He grins, tapping a rolled piece of aged papyrus with inky fingers. You nod because, obviously, who wouldn't want to read a 3,000-year-old how-to guide for delivering babies? He unrolls it carefully, the way you'd pet a snake that's just eaten something suspicious. The script is elegant and cramped in Demotic Egyptian, mostly practical advice, surprisingly blunt with the occasional sketch of a woman bent over in a decidedly uncomfortable position. You squint. Is that one giving birth? Standing up? He nods. One of the easier postures. Gravity helps. You arch a brow already tired just thinking about it. According to the papyrus, which is likely based on even older oral traditions, birth should be managed with a combination of herbs, heat, prayer, and gentle touch. The scroll details which plants to boil into infusions, castor oil plants, honey, frankincense, and sycamore fig bark, all applied in vague measures like a pinch or until the goddess is satisfied. So basically ancient Egypt's version of seasoned to taste. Then comes the part you weren't expecting: pelvic manipulation techniques. The text suggests certain hand placements, ways to greet the child before it sees the light. You picture ancient midwives crouched in dark rooms memorizing every line of this document while hoping none of it goes horribly wrong. You ask, did all midwives get trained like this? The scribe shrugs, if they could read, but most were trained by their mothers or aunts. Experience over scrolls makes sense. Written records were rare and valuable, and besides, not everyone had the luxury of consulting papyrus when a baby decided it was time. Historians still argue whether these manuals were widely distributed or just elite knowledge hoarded by temples and upper-class households. It's possible that most women never even saw a scroll like this, but still knew what to do when the time came. After all, when you live in a world where you've seen 10 births before your 16th birthday, you pick things up. Back in the birthing hut, you notice something else from the scroll playing out a foot massage. One midwife kneels beside the laboring woman and rhythmically presses her thumbs into the arches of her feet. The papyrus suggests this helps the womb loosen its gait. Sounds mystical, but honestly it looks soothing enough to make you want to give birth just to get one. Meanwhile, another helper fans the woman with an ostrich feather. That detail wasn't in the scroll, but it feels very Egyptian, doesn't it? Always a little glamour even in the blood and groaning. Then comes the fringe advice, the stuff less rooted in reason and more in magical thinking. One section advises midwives to whisper the baby's name into the mother's ear during contractions to entice the soul to emerge. Another describes a charm where a red ribbon is tied around the mother's left wrist and looped over her belly, anchoring the cord of the stars. You blink at the scribe. Did people actually do this? He raises an eyebrow. Would you risk not doing it? Fair point. The papyrus also includes recipes for what to feed the mother before and after labor. Pre-birth dates mashed with beer. Post-birth more beer. So much beer, the scribe laughs. We should have built breweries before pyramids. You catch one line that makes you pause. If the mother's gaze dims before the child arrives, bring her fig milk and burn incense at her feet. It's poetic and also terrifying. You've seen it happen the moment when a woman's strength just leaks out of her body and her eyes go somewhere else. Sometimes they come back, sometimes they don't. Just outside the room, two women prepare a steaming pouch of herbs. They're using a technique the scroll refers to as smoking the womb, a form of fumigation believed to cleanse the birth canal and reduce bleeding. You sniff the air. It smells like mint and something sharp, almost metallic. Not exactly comforting, but if it helps, then someone fetches you. Another birth started, of course it has, and this one is breezing along, faster than most. You hurry to the small stone home just in time to see a mother upright on her knees gripping a wooden pole set in the earth. Her body rocks gently with each wave. No screaming yet, just deep breaths, eyes closed as though she's meditating through an earthquake. A teenage midwife stands by with a pot of honey and warm cloths. You recognize that from the papyrus used for cleansing the perineum, though also strangely, sometimes to sweeten the way. One of the more curious beliefs was that honey could guide the soul toward gentleness. Probably didn't hurt as an antiseptic either. This birth is calm, strange given what you've already seen. The child slides into the world without much fuss, and the mother catches her own baby gasping with disbelief, laughter, and tears. Everyone exhales at once like the house itself is relieved. The scribe who has wandered over out of nosy curiosity watches with a softened gaze. They won't write that down, he says quietly. The easy ones never make it into scrolls. Just the omens, the warnings. You nod. No drama, no ink. Quirky side note, some Egyptian women used fertility tests that involved urinating on barley and wheat seeds. If the grain sprouted, they were said to be pregnant. Modern tests have shown this has about a 70% success rate, which is honestly more accurate than your last horoscope. Later, as you help carry away the used linens, you glance once more at the birthing scroll. You wonder how many lives it saved and how many it didn't. The mother is already dozing off the baby curled against her chest like a tiny loaf of bread. The room is quiet now except for the low clink of beads on a midwife's necklace. The scribe rolls up his scroll and mutters half to himself, life comes in screaming. But if you're lucky, it leaves in sleep. You nod, not because it makes sense, but because it feels like something you'll remember when the next door opens and the next birth begins. You're kneeling in a dim, clay-walled room surrounded by bowls, bundles of herbs, and jars that may or may not still contain what their ancient labels promised. A faintly sweet, slightly sour smell hangs in the air, thick as syrup. This, you're told, is the apothecary's corner. And tonight, the midwives are making magic. The woman lying on the mat across from you is still in the early stages of labor, her breathing steady, her brow just beginning to glisten with sweat. It's quiet now, but everyone knows the storm is coming, so they prepare. And you're handed a pestle and told very casually, grind the pomegranate seeds and don't sneeze into the fenugreek this time. This is where medicine meets mysticism. Ancient Egyptian remedies weren't just about treating symptoms. They were tools for controlling the unseen forces believed to swirl around a laboring woman. Evil spirits, jealous ghosts, spiteful gods with a flair for the dramatic. Any one of them might be lurking, waiting for a chance to make things go terribly wrong. So the women do what they've done for generations. They make concoctions that double as potions and prayers. That pomegranate you're grinding, it's believed to contract the womb and boost fertility. The fenugreek is a pain reliever. The mixture of honey and black cumin seeds, that's to sweeten the breath of the baby, and just maybe keep the mother from biting someone when things get intense. You help prepare a compress of warmed lotus root, which they'll place on the lower back later, just when the contractions start stealing her breath. One of the older midwives mutters that this particular recipe was passed down from her great-grandmother, who claimed to have delivered a priestess who never screamed once. She just hummed, she says proudly. You nod respectfully, though you strongly suspect that priestess was either unconscious or lying. A good girl beside you stirs a bowl of thick amber-colored liquid over a tiny flame. She explains it's a blend of honey, frankincense, and goat fat. For rubbing on the belly, she says to confuse the pain. You raise an eyebrow. Does that work? She grins. Sometimes, depends how polite the gods are being. Fringe fact: some remedies included crocodile dung dried and ground into powder, used not just in contraceptive applications but occasionally in childbirth rituals, likely smeared on door frames to ward off evil, not on the mother we hope. Though no one here will admit for sure. You point to a jar suspiciously dark and crumbly, and the girl just winks. You don't want to know. The belief was that childbirth pain wasn't natural, it was inflicted, not by biology but by malevolent forces. That pain had to be coaxed out, soothed, distracted, or outright tricked. Hence all the layering of rituals and remedies, chanting and charms. Yes, but also compresses, teas, smoke, and oils. The woman groans softly. One of the midwives rubs her abdomen with oil warmed over a candle flame. The room smells suddenly of myrrh and ginger. You feel like you're standing in a tea shop run by witches. Good witches, but still. Historians still argue whether these preparations were primarily medicinal or purely magical. The line is thin and often non-existent. A crushed herb might be pharmacologically helpful, but that wouldn't matter without the proper spell spoken in the right tone with the right gods listening in. Every bowl of herbs is also a prayer, every massage a ritual, every whisper a ward. You help thread a red cord around the woman's ankle, an ancient protection charm meant to bind the soul to the body during labor. No one questions it. Some believe it came from Hathor herself, the sky goddess of motherhood, music, and joy. In some stories, she wore a red girdle to protect women in childbirth. So naturally, midwives use one too. Another woman arrives carrying a bundle wrapped in faded linen. Inside are stones, smooth, rounded, warm from being left in the sun all afternoon. These will be placed on the woman's hips, lower back, and stomach, not only for heat but to settle the womb. You place one gently against the mother's skin, and she sighs with something that sounds almost like relief. You glance again at the jars, some clearly labeled, others with symbols you don't recognize. There's something deeply comforting about the whole mess of it, the mystery, the repetition, the illusion of control. Even if most of these concoctions are more placebo than potent, they offer the women something invaluable: hope. Quirky aside, one recorded birthing ritual involved drawing protective glyphs around the laboring woman using milk and crushed garlic. The midwife would walk in a circle 3 times chanting a hymn to Isis while dragging a small stick behind her. You're honestly not sure if it's magical or just cardio. In this house, they've opted for smoke instead. A censer swings slowly from a string above, releasing clouds of sandalwood and bitter herbs. You breathe it in, and your eyelids start to droop. Not from magic, probably, but because it's 400 degrees in here and you've been up for what feels like 4 eternities. Then something shifts. The mother's breathing becomes shallower, her hands tighten into fists. One midwife steps forward and gently pinches the space between the mother's thumb and forefinger, a pressure point, she says, that opens the cervix. Another lays a cool cloth across her forehead, muttering a blessing under her breath. You're handed another bowl, this one filled with a thick green paste. Mint and fig, someone says, for the final push. You're still not clear if it's for eating, rubbing, or just waving around like a lucky charm. But you bring it over. Outside, a rooster crows early, a false alarm. The sun's not up yet, but it's close. Inside, the mother lets out a long, low cry, not sharp, not panicked, resigned, determined. The midwives gather. One dips her fingers in the paste, then presses it to the woman's abdomen in slow circular motions. Another checks the birth canal and gives a nod, almost. You kneel nearby, hands in your lap, watching everything unfold with a strange mix of reverence and exhaustion. There's nothing high-tech here. No monitors, no sterile gloves, no machines that beep urgently, just women, herbs, heat, and belief. And somehow it works. The baby arrives shortly after, coated in the usual goo and fury. Another girl, another soul pulled from whatever strange, bright place she was waiting in. The mother sobs with laughter this time, and someone offers her a date soaked in wine. She takes it with shaking hands. Later you help clean up. You're careful not to spill the leftover paste, even though it's probably just fig and mint. Or maybe not. Maybe that bowl holds a spell that kept death away for one more night. The sun is up now, soft and pink, as if trying to apologize for what the night has dragged you through. You follow the midwives through narrow alleys toward a house with a wide doorway and a basket of linen resting outside. This one's early, someone says, not looking at you. Too early. Inside, the air is still cool. The clay walls are painted with faded lotus blooms and protective eyes, and in the center of the room sits a square, low structure, 4 decorated bricks, just like before, but placed carefully around a circle of woven reeds. This is no ordinary floor. You've stepped into a mesquinet hut. This birthing space is sacred. It's a place designed by belief precision and mild desperation. No men enter here, not even the gods unless they've been invited. The air smells of copper, dried herbs, and anxiety. The bricks are scrawled with protective spells. One of them bears the name of Mesquinet herself, the goddess of childbirth and fate. She's more than just a myth. In the Egyptian mind, Mesquinet was the one who breathed the ka into the newborn, the vital force, the soul that sticks. And she was present not just symbolically, but tangibly through these birthing bricks. You place your fingers on one. It's still warm from the sun, still humming with that strange stillness you now associate with the moments before everything either begins or ends. The laboring woman is young, barely out of childhood herself. Her face is drawn, her lips cracked, and her belly enormous. You wonder just briefly if she's having twins. One of the midwives nods grimly as if she knows what you're thinking. No one says it out loud, but there's a certain tension here, a sense that the bricks alone might not be enough. The woman moans quietly. The contractions haven't started, but her back is arched, her body bracing for what's to come. One midwife tucks a figurine of Tawer between the bricks beneath her, mumbling something about balance and protection. We need her tonight. They close the doorway behind you. The light shifts, dimming. This isn't just privacy, it's part of the ritual. The birth room becomes a sealed world. Outside is the mundane. Inside is the realm of blood, life, fate, and struggle. You are for the time being between worlds. You're told to fetch the oil. You do. You're told to dip a piece of linen in warm milk and place it beneath the mother's feet. You do that too. You are a silent assistant, an eager ghost with thumbs. She begins to groan in earnest now. Low, rhythmic sounds that shake the inside of your ears. One of the midwives sprinkles natron along the room's perimeter, forming a protective circle. Another ties a string around the mother's ankle, red again, but this one knotted 3 times. Why? 3 historians still argue whether the number had astrological, religious, or simply superstitious significance. But in here, no one questions the knots. As the contractions build, the bricks become more than a symbolic stage. They're her throne, her support, her last hope. One brick positioned behind her lower back is slightly tilted. She leans into it as though it were a friend. The use of bricks may seem bizarre to modern eyes, but they allowed a woman to squat a position believed to speed up labor. And not without reason. Gravity is a better midwife than many who wear linen. In the corner, one of the more seasoned midwives lights a small fire of dried papyrus shavings and cedar bark. The smoke curls upward, thick and fragrant. This is a womb smoke meant to both calm the mother and distract any lurking spirits. You watch the smoke curl around the brick corners and vanish into the corners of the room. A part of you wants to follow it. You're told to sing. You blink. Me, yes, one of the women says. Everyone sings, even if it's awful, so you hum. Then you murmur the chant they all seem to know by heart. Let the gate open, let the path soften, let the child find the dawn. The sound is mesmerizing. The chant loops and loops until you forget you're singing, until it seems like the room is singing itself. The mother begins to bear down now. The sweat on her face glistens in the soft lamplight. Her hands claw at the reeds below her. One midwife reaches between the bricks to check for progress. "She's close," she whispers, "but she's scared." Fear is a dangerous thing in this room, not because it's irrational, but because it invites uncertainty, which in this space could mean death. So the women surround her. They chant louder. One places a hand on her chest. Another strokes her hair. "Look at the bricks," they say. "They hold you. You're not alone." Then comes the turning point, a long, hard contraction. The mother screams, truly screams now, and something shifts. You see her body fold forward, tense, then release. The baby's crowning. The midwives leap into practice motion. There's a kind of wild serenity to them, rushed but calm, precise, but full of fire. You hand over a linen wrap. You feel your knees aching from kneeling so long. You notice that your hands are shaking. And then it's done. A baby covered in blood and vernix slipping into the world onto sacred bricks and screaming like a pharaoh. The midwives clean her quickly, then lift her into the air so that her first sight is the flickering ceiling, believed to be an echo of the stars, the eternal canopy. They chant again. The mother sobs. The baby cries louder. The bricks have done their job. Quirky fact, some bricks were actually inscribed with scenes of dancing dwarves, likely depictions of Bess, the protector of households and women in labor. The idea was that even if a woman was birthing in agony, she could look down and see tiny stone dancers cheering her on. Later, as the room is cleaned, the bricks are wiped down, thanked aloud, and repositioned to rest. One is slightly chipped. A midwife kisses it gently and whispers, "Still strong." The mesquinette hut returns to silence. The chants fade. The spirits, if they were here, have wandered off. The mother sleeps now. The baby's breath is slow and steady. And you once again walk outside into the sunlight, not as someone who merely observed a birth, but someone who helped summon life through stone song and sweat. You're starting to notice a rhythm to these days, a sacred repetition. One mother leaves the birthing hut pale but proud, and by sunset another takes her place. In between, the midwives clean chant, and if there's time, snack on figs while pretending not to worry. This evening you're trailing behind the oldest midwife in the village, a woman named Heptet, whose back is curved like a question mark, but whose hands still move like lightning. She doesn't speak much. She just rattles. That's not a metaphor. Her pouch tied around her waist with fraying hemp cord literally rattles with charms and bones. You hear it before you see it. The clink of carved amulets, the jingle of bronze rings, and something that sounds suspiciously like goat knuckles. When you finally catch up to her, Heptet is laying out her tools for the night. A polished stone, a string of scarab amulets, a carved ivory wand in the shape of a snake. None of it seems strictly medical, but all of it is necessary. These are her protectors. Midwives like Heptet carry the bundles of power, not just to comfort the mothers, but to fend off every unpredictable force that might blow through a birth room. And in ancient Egypt, everything had a spirit: air, blood, pain, even your sneezes probably. So the more charms, the better. She lays them out on a reed mat carefully ordered. One for Bess, of course, the cheeky dwarf god whose tongue sticks out as if he's mocking the danger. Another for Taweret carved in lapis, her belly bulging with endless potential. A third stranger object looks like a tiny boat, to carry the soul in safely. Heptet says flatly, as if you should have known. The bones goat, knuckles smoothed and polished, used for divination. Before a particularly risky birth, Heptet might toss them into a bowl and study the way they land. Sometimes I see bad signs, she tells you, but I don't tell the mother. Just chant louder. You sit beside her as she selects a fresh linen wrap from a basket, dabs it with frankincense oil, and murmurs to it like she's waking it from sleep. These women aren't just birth attendants, they're spiritual gatekeepers. One hand delivers the child, the other holds back to the dark. Historians still argue whether these charms were viewed as divine interventions or simply psychological support. Did the midwives believe the amulets had power, or did the mothers believe hard enough that they worked anyway? You watch Heptet kiss each charm before tucking it back into her pouch, and you're pretty sure belief wasn't the problem. She leads you into a small home where a woman is laboring early, barely through her first trimester. Miscarriage. Heptet says softly, eyes scanning the woman's trembling form. The room feels heavy. There's no ritual birth song tonight. No bricks, just a fire, a quiet chant, and the careful cradling of grief. Heptet kneels and places one of her charms on the woman's stomach, an ivory carving of a frog. Heket, she whispers, the goddess of fertility, of beginnings and sometimes sad endings. The midwives aren't just there for the triumphant moments. They hold space for loss too. Quirky fact, some midwives kept worry dolls or carved wooden animals they would press into the mother's hand during labor, not for magic, but to give her something to squeeze. Heptet offers one now shaped like a lion cub. The woman takes it with shaking fingers and presses it to her cheek. You help gather herbs, mild ones this time. No strong painkillers, just comfort. Chamomile, dried lotus, honey boiled into a thick syrup and poured slowly into the woman's mouth. She relaxes slightly, but her eyes never close. The night drifts by in slow movements. The fire dims, the room cools, and the miscarriage completes itself with no screams, just a long trembling exhale. Heptet places the lost bundle in a basket wrapped in white linen and walks it outside past the courtyard to a quiet patch of earth near the riverbank. A tiny mound will be built there later. For now, she kneels, presses a palm into the dirt, and whispers a name no one will repeat. Back in the hut, the woman sleeps. Her sister holds her hand. The lion cub rests on her chest. Heptet returns and begins to clean her tools, each one wiped down, re-oiled, re-wrapped. You hand her a cloth. She accepts it without comment. We protect the mother, she says eventually, even when they come away with empty arms. You nod. There's no room for sentimentality in this job, but there's endless space for care. Later that week, another mother goes into labor in full sun, this time a safe one. She's surrounded by songs and cinnamon oil, and Heptet is right there rattling as she walks her pouch, dancing like a spell on her hip. You notice a new charm, an obsidian cat this time. For balance, she says when you point it out. The last one took something. This one must give something back. Superstition, maybe. But when the baby comes smoothly screaming and pink and whole, no one questions the magic. The midwives cheer, the mother laughs, and Heptet slips the charm back into her pouch with a satisfied grunt. After the birth, you sit with Heptet in the sun, her tools laid out like a general's weapons. She runs her fingers along a charm shaped like a cobra. This one bites the bad spirits, she says. You ask if it works. She narrows her eyes. We're still alive, aren't we? And somehow, despite the heat, the chaos, the dust, and death, and divine maybes, you are. It's nearly midday, the heat heavy enough to slow time, and yet the birthing hut buzzes with energy, like a hive mid-swarm. The woman at the center is in hard labor, her cries raw, deep, and insistent, echoing off the clay walls like ancient thunder. You've heard it many times by now, but somehow it never stops hitting you in the chest. She's gripping a birth rope suspended from the ceiling, knotted, rough, sturdy. With each contraction, she hauls herself upward, letting gravity pull the baby down while her legs tremble like reeds in wind. Someone hands you a wet cloth. You dab at her brow, her neck, her clenched hands. A midwife shouts over the chaos, "Sing, she needs rhythm." And so you sing again with that strange chant now tattooed onto your tongue. Let the gate open, let the path soften, let the child find the dawn. But this time they add something else, a longer, breathier phrase. You listen as the midwives call upon Hathor, the great sky goddess, the lady of birth and joy. Her name is spoken like a drumbeat between contractions. Hathor, hear us. Hathor, ease her. Hathor, fly low. You realize this isn't just a name drop. It's an invocation, a direct appeal. And it's growing louder. Hathor's domain stretches far, music, dancing, love, and of course childbirth. Her temples often included birthing chambers, and her priestesses were known to assist women through delivery. Here in this dusty hut, she's honored not with polished hymns, but with sweat, shouting, and cracked voices begging the sky. The mother's back arches, and a scream rips from her throat, sharp enough to rattle your teeth. You flinch, but no one else does. This is expected. The pain, they believe, is the last protest of the womb before it releases what it was holding too tightly. One of the midwives raises a sistrum, a sacred rattle used in temple rituals, usually shaken to honor Hathor herself. Its metal discs clink like small bells as it sways, filling the room with a shimmer of sound. It's soothing and sharp all at once, oddly perfect for the moment. You're told to stand behind her now to support her back with your arms as she squats. You obey, legs already numb from kneeling all morning. The woman's shoulders shake. She moans. The baby isn't coming. Something's not moving. And then the prayers change. Suddenly the chant shifts tone from a gentle rhythm to something almost fierce. One midwife raises both hands to the ceiling and shouts a verse barely decipherable through her ragged voice. Another begins to beat a small drum, not to calm, but to summon. It's not for the mother anymore. It's for Hathor. This is desperation, not panic, something more focused. These women believe that God's walk among them, that birth opens a spiritual doorway. When things go wrong, they don't switch strategies, they call louder. The mother starts calling too, not to the midwives or to you, but straight to the heavens. Hathor, I am your daughter. Hathor, carry me through. The sistrum rings faster. The midwives begin moving in a slow circle, hands raised, chanting in rhythm with the contractions. You've never seen them do this before. It's a sacred dance, possibly forbidden outside the temples, but here it's survival. The lines between prayer and practice blur entirely. Historians still argue whether these invocations of Hathor were officially sanctioned, or if they lived mostly in folk tradition, unwritten, undocumented, but undeniably powerful. The official priesthood didn't usually bother recording what happened in a village hut, but the midwives did what worked, and what worked was faith, fury, and rhythm. Then a breakthrough. The woman lets out a grunt that's more like a roar, and suddenly the baby begins to emerge. The cries rise again, louder this time, ecstatic. One push, another. The sistrum falls silent as a wet, gasping life slides into the world. A girl. The midwives cry out in joy and relief. You nearly collapse. The baby wails a sharp, clear sound that cuts through the hut like sunlight through smoke. The mother slumps backward, eyes wide, chest heaving, then sobs, raw, beautiful sobs. You place the baby in her arms. She clutches her daughter close, whispering words you can't understand. Her fingers tremble against the baby's soft skull, still pulsing with the memory of the womb. Someone lights more incense. A second midwife anoints the baby's forehead with perfumed oil, a gift to Hathor, a thanks for safe passage. You're told to sprinkle powdered lotus petals over the mother's chest. It's symbolic, but the scent is calming like dusk blooming. Quirky fact in some local traditions, mothers would whisper the names of every Hathor priestess they knew during labor, believing it summoned invisible midwives from the other side to help guide the child out. Imagine labor as a group project with some very powerful ghost assistants. Once the baby is swaddled and sleeping, the midwives gather to sing a quieter hymn. No sistrums now, just a lullaby. It's soft, haunting, and oddly formal, like a liturgy sung only on days when life nearly slipped through the cracks. The mother finally sleeps, her head resting on your lap. You stroke her hair, suddenly aware of how warm and heavy she is, how human and fragile. Outside, the world goes on, merchants shouting, goats bleating, a cart creaking past, but in this room, time is suspended. You look over at the sistrum. It's been hung on a hook now, its shine dulled by the dust in the afternoon light. Silent but ready. Someone chuckles quietly and says, "Next time, don't wait so long to call Hathor." You laugh too, breathless and sore. Noted. And as you leave the hut, stepping back into the blaze of afternoon sun, you realize something strange. Your shoulders ache like you've carried someone. Maybe you did. By now, the sounds of labor are burned into your ears. The rhythmic groaning, the sudden cries, the whispering of names between contractions like fragile prayers. But today the birth is quiet, unsettlingly so. You're called into a home where the air is still and thick, and the mother's breath is shallow. She doesn't scream, she doesn't moan. She just grips the birth rope with white knuckles, teeth grinding sweat, dripping from her chin in steady rivulets. The baby is late. Not hours late, days. This is where tradition gets serious. You've entered the danger zone and everyone knows it. Midwives pace in and out, preparing everything they can, herbs, oils, chants, but their eyes give them away. They've seen this before. You've seen it before. When labor stalls, when the baby won't come, the worst is always lurking. You're handed a stone flat, an oval still warm from the fire pit. One of the women places it on the mother's lower belly, pressing it down gently with her palm. For heat, she says. For opening. The practice goes back millennia, using heat to relax the muscles and stimulate contractions. Another midwife begins applying hot compresses made from flax and goat fat to the mother's back. You help your hands, moving in slow, practiced circles. The skin beneath is tight taut like a drum. You try not to think about what's at stake. Hot stones were used not just for comfort, but as part of a larger network of beliefs. Some were engraved with symbols, even prayers, before being heated. Others were shaped specifically for different parts of the body. Hips, lower back, ankles, like some ancient version of therapeutic spa tools. The science, who knows? Historians still argue whether these treatments were truly effective or just the best guesses of desperate hands. But here in this heavy room filled with sweat and smoke, no one questions it. Suddenly the mother stiffens, her mouth opens, a soundless scream. She lurches forward and the midwives rush to her side. Push, they cry in unison like a chorus rehearsed too many times. But the baby isn't coming. The head is there, but stuck. A shoulder caught. A tight cord, no one's sure. There's a frantic scrambling. More hot stones are swapped and more pressure applied. Then one midwife moves behind the mother and wraps her arms around her belly. She begins a practice rocking motion, a rhythmic tug that seems both ancient and desperate. She's helping the baby turn, someone whispers. You watch in tense silence as the room moves like a wave, everything sinking to that one movement, that one hope. Still nothing. The air grows thicker. Then someone grabs the birthing stool, a rare tool carved from wood shaped like a crescent with a gap in the middle. You hadn't seen it used much before. It's often reserved for difficult labors or higher status women, but this mother is neither. She just needs it. They place her onto the stool, her knees wide heels planted into the dirt floor. You brace behind her. A midwife kneels between her legs, her hands ready. Another contraction. The mother screams this time finally, and with a shuddering push, the baby emerges bluish and frighteningly still. No one breathes. The midwife clears the mouth, then the nose. A slap. Another. Then like someone flicked on life, the baby gasps, sputters, and wails, and the room exhales. You feel your knees give out as you sink to the floor. equal parts relief and disbelief. The mother collapses forward. The midwives go to work immediately cutting the cord with a copper blade, tying it off with linen string, cleaning the child's tiny limbs with warm cloths soaked in myrrh water. You're handed a jar of herbal salve. Rub it on her hips, someone instructs. She'll ache for days. You obey, careful reverent. The woman's eyes are half closed, her breath slowing. She reaches out blindly for her baby and cradles it with a kind of trembling awe. Then comes the afterbirth. The midwives catch it in a bowl and inspect it for shape and size. It's not just anatomy here, it's omens. Quirky fact, the placenta was often considered more than just tissue. Some believed it had a spirit of its own, a twin that guided the child. Depending on its condition, it might be buried, burned, or floated down the Nile in a miniature reed boat. Today they bury it near the threshold of the home, so the child will never wander too far from their people. Meanwhile, you're tasked with moving the hot stones to the mother's lower belly again, this time to reduce bleeding. There's no cauterization here, no stitching in the modern sense, just heat pressure and an alarming amount of prayer. One midwife quietly mutters something about binding the blood. Historians speculate that this pressure-based method, combined with herbal compresses, may have helped some women recover without hemorrhaging, but the margin was thin, too thin, and not everyone made it. Outside the fire pit crackles. You leave briefly to wash the blood from your hands. The water in the basin is warm from the sun, and streaks of red swirl in circles before vanishing into the dirt. A child passes by, peeks into the hut, then scurries away. No one hides the truth from children here. They grow up watching life arrive, and sometimes watching it leave. You return to find the mother sitting upright now, nursing her daughter for the first time. Her face is slack, exhausted but calm, the kind of calm that comes after surviving something that should have ended you. One of the midwives places a new hot stone at her feet, wrapped in linen and soaked with rose oil. It helps the swelling, she says. You nod. You've stopped questioning any of it. Later, as the sun dips low and the hut is cleaned, you sit with the midwives around the fire. Someone passes you a date soaked in wine. Another shares a joke about Bess having stubby arms but strong hands for catching babies. You laugh not because it's funny, but because you can. And somewhere nearby, another mother begins to groan. You hear it, they all hear it, and just like that, it begins again. You hear the silence before you see the doorway. No chant, no rattle, no steady moan of a woman pushing through pain. Just stillness, heavy and metallic like the air right before a storm. The midwives are moving quickly, but their faces are stone. You follow hesitant past a low courtyard and into a narrow house where the light barely reaches the walls. The labor is over, but no one's smiling. She didn't make it. The woman lies still on the mat, her belly now flat, her face pale beneath a sheen of dried sweat. The room has already been cleaned, the birth bricks moved aside, the soiled cloths taken out, but the scent lingers, blood, copper, milk, and something colder, something final. The baby survived. That's clear by the soft, healthy cry coming from the arms of an aunt who sits just outside the doorway, rocking back and forth, whispering to the bundle like it understands. Maybe it does. It's only a few hours old and already motherless. You take a step toward the body, unsure if you're allowed. One of the midwives gives a slight nod. So you approach. Her arms have been crossed over her chest, a small amulet placed between her hands, a figurine of Tawaret, the same kind used to ward off death. She looks asleep except for the way her lips don't quite close, one eye half-lidded as though death was in too much of a hurry to shut it properly. Death in childbirth wasn't rare here. Even now, after seeing so many survive, you know the odds. Modern estimates suggest up to 10% of women died from childbirth in ancient Egypt. Sometimes it was blood loss, sometimes infection, sometimes the baby got stuck, and neither mother nor child came through. There were no cesareans. not if you wanted the mother to live. Still, every time it happens, the hut gets a little colder. The women begin the morning ritual, not wailing, at least not yet, but a soft, breathy chant. It's not in honor of the gods, it's for the mother, for her spirit, her soul, to ease the path into the afterlife. One midwife walks a slow circle around her body, sprinkling dried herbs, frankincense, myrrh, bits of ground lotus. Another begins anointing her forehead with oil. You're asked to help wash the body. You kneel beside her with a damp cloth, your hands trembling slightly. Her skin is cooling. You wipe her cheeks gently, then her arms. You think of how hard they grip the birth rope, how strong they must have been only hours ago. And then a strange moment, the midwife beside you whispers something. Not to you, to the woman. You brought her through, she says. Now rest. Quirky belief, some midwives thought a mother who died in childbirth became a sort of protector, her spirit staying close to help other women survive. She'll hear us, another midwife murmurs. She'll stay near the bricks. Once the body is clean, they wrap her in linen, not the full mummification, not yet. That comes later. This is the preparation, a temporary shroud. Someone places a small carved scarab on her chest to guard her heart on the journey to the underworld. Outside, a man paces. Her husband. You can tell by his eyes they're dry but wide, like he's seeing a world he no longer understands. He won't be allowed in to see her until the mourning rites are over. And even then, maybe not. Historians still argue whether men were completely excluded from birth and death chambers out of ritual necessity or if it was more cultural habit. Either way, this space, this moment belongs to the women. They lift the body gently onto a wooden stretcher, the linen bundle stiff and silent. You help guide the feet, careful not to bump the doorway. The sun hits her face one last time, and then she's carried into the street toward the mortuary quarter near the temple. The midwives don't follow. Their work, oddly enough, isn't with the dead. It's with what's left behind. So you stay. And you see what happens next. The baby, still red and wrinkled, is being held by her grandmother now. She doesn't cry, just stares, those wide dark eyes, already searching for something that isn't there. There's no bottle to feed her with, no formula, no freezer of milk. That's a problem, but not a new one. Wet nurses were the solution, and one has already arrived. She's older, strong, with breasts that speak of recent motherhood. She nods once, lifts the infant to her chest, and within minutes the child is feeding, cheeks fluttering against soft skin. It's a fragile sort of victory. You sit in the corner and watch, trying not to cry. You're not supposed to. Not in front of the baby, not in front of the other midwives. They begin to prepare the space for the next birth. Yes, already. The bricks are scrubbed, the tools cleaned, the linen replaced, a new amulet hung from the wall. The cycle continues, not coldly, not carelessly, but because it has to. There's no time to pause when life demands attention again. That night, the midwives gather in the quietest corner of the village. They light a small fire, not for warmth, but for memory. One places the woman's name into the flame on a scrap of papyrus. It curls, smokes, and disappears. She was brave, someone says. She stayed silent until the end. She didn't need to scream, another replies. We heard her anyway. They all nod, then silence. Then softly, one of them hums the birth song, the one usually sung to welcome a child. Only now it sounds different. Lower, slower. A lullaby for both the beginning and the end. Because in ancient Egypt, everything returns to the Nile. Blood, bone, soul, grief, and always the hope that the next one will go better. You go to sleep that night with the scent of myrrh in your hair, and the baby's cries echoing faintly in your chest. The rooster's cry jerks you awake, not that you were sleeping deeply. You sit up on the mat joint, stiff from a night spent half curled and sweating under the weight of what you witnessed yesterday. The sun has barely cleared the rooftops, and already you hear it again, that high, insistent, primal sound. Another birth. But this one is different. The air feels strange. The midwives are murmuring in low tones, glancing upward, muttering about omens. You follow them to a home on the edge of the village where palm fronds whisper with every breeze, and a small cluster of women wait outside, anxiously biting at their nails. Inside, the laboring mother is breathing steadily. The birth bricks arrange the charm figures already placed, but no one's smiling. The sky isn't right. Too many clouds, wind from the wrong direction, and a bird, an ibis sacred to Thoth, flew directly over the house at sunrise. Normally a good sign, but not this early and not alone, or so they say. You try not to roll your eyes. You've seen births go well under worse skies, but you quickly remember where you are. In this world, everything means something. Nothing is dismissed as coincidence. One midwife leans in close. If the stars are wrong, we do things differently. So you help hang an extra amulet over the birthing space, this one carved from obsidian and shaped like a lotus. You sprinkle powdered turquoise at the door. A midwife burns Kai-Fi incense, a blend so complex you're sure half of it is dreams and sugar. The scent is calming, sweet, resinous, rich. The mother moans softly, shifting on the bricks, eyes closed. The labor proceeds as usual at first, but then something eerie. The baby is coming too quickly. No long hours of contractions, no slow descent, just a sudden pressure, a scream, and the child begins to emerge. The midwives exchange glances. She's early, one says, too early. The baby is born pale, quiet, breathing, but only just. You hold your breath. One of the women places her hand over the child's chest, muttering a verse to Hecate, the frog-headed goddess of fertility. Don't take her yet, she pleads. Let her stay. And then, a shudder. The baby squeals, alive, fragile, but alive. They wrap her quickly, place her on the mother's chest. The room breathes again. And then the real work begins. Omens. The midwives consult everything they can, starting with the placenta, which they unroll on a flat slab like it's a sacred map. Its shape, color, even the way the cord curls, it all gets interpreted. This one looks like a scorpion's tail, someone whispers. Sharp luck, protection, but also pain. Then comes the star chart, not an actual scroll. There's no time but a quick reading based on where the stars were when the birth happened. A younger midwife stares through a crack in the roof, muttering names. Sirius. Orion's belt. The moon waning. She will be stubborn, the woman concludes, born under a proud sky. You raise an eyebrow. Will she live long silence? Historians still argue whether these interpretations were taken seriously by everyone or just as comforting rituals passed down through generations. But here, there's no debate. What's seen is accepted, what's not seen is feared. Next comes the divination by oil. A bowl of water, a drop of oil, and a chant. The oil swirls clockwise. That's good, a smooth life. But then it splits into two puddles. A long pause. Two paths, one midwife murmurs. Two lives, one will end early. The mother doesn't ask questions, she just clutches the baby tighter. You step outside for a breath, overwhelmed by the layered meaning being poured over every detail. A lizard scuttles across your foot, startling, yes, but here. That's another omen. Lizards are tricky. Fertility and death depending on the color. You look back at it. Brown, neutral, hopefully. Back inside, the baby has begun to feed. Her tiny fists clench and her cheeks puff with effort. That alone feels miraculous. The omens may be murky, but the child is here, and hungry. Later, the grandmother arrives with a naming bowl, a tradition in some households where the name is whispered into water before being given aloud. The water reflects the child's soul, they believe. If it ripples without wind, the name should be changed. They whisper the name Nefru. It means beauty, The water stays still. You feel an odd warmth settle in your chest. Maybe the omens weren't so bad after all. Quirky fact, in some villages, a baby born in silence without crying was believed to have the power to hear the gods. This baby born with barely a squeak now sleeps as if she's listening to something the rest of you can't hear. Before the mother is allowed to rest, one final reading is performed, the birth orientation. The direction the baby face while being born, head toward the east is best. Toward the Nile, mixed results. This, one south. Toward the desert. She will walk alone, a midwife says quietly. You wonder what that even means for a girl in this world, where independence isn't so much a blessing as a burden. The next morning, the mother is well enough to sit up and eat. Bread soaked in date wine, soft cheese, and honey. She smiles weakly. The baby dozes. The omens for now rest. And you realize it's not really about knowing the future. It's about creating meaning from chaos. When birth brings a storm of blood, pain, and fear, people look for symbols, patterns, signs, anything to make sense of it. To believe they have a little control in a world where they really don't. So maybe the stars don't matter. Maybe the scorpion-shaped placenta means nothing, but it feels like something. And in a place where medicine is limited and danger is daily, that feeling can be just enough to get through another night. The birth is over, and for once there's no emergency, no screaming, no ghostly silence. Just a sleepy mother and a healthy baby boy blinking under the soft light filtering through a reed window. You sit nearby, slouched against a cool wall, fingers stained with the usual mix of oil, blood, and dried herbs. You're half expecting another cry to ring out somewhere across the village, but instead, there's laughter, actual laughter. Turns out this is the rarest of events in ancient Egypt, a birth celebration, not a funeral with bread on the side, not a somber nod and silent brick washing, a party, or at least a 1400 BCE equivalent of one. You're led to the courtyard by one of the midwives, where a few women have already begun decorating. There are garlands of lotus flowers, bowls of fresh figs and dates, a clay jug of wine, actual wine, not just thick, sleep-inducing beer, and a small platter of sweetened cakes shaped like tiny ankhs. They even light incense that doesn't smell like antiseptic or fear. Just perfume. That's it. No magic. No protection spell. Just nice smelling air. You breathe in too deeply and immediately cough. Too nice. The mother is bathed in warm water steeped with rose petals and mint leaves. A young girl braids her hair while another applies a line of kohl to her eyes, not for ritual but vanity. She gave birth, someone says, not died. And just like that, you're reminded that in this culture, beauty isn't put on hold for pain. In fact, it's invited in to celebrate endurance. Strength and beauty go hand in hand like hot stones and goat fat. The baby is brought out swaddled in fine linen and wrapped with a narrow red ribbon. Protection, a midwife whispers, but also fashion. He's placed in a shallow basket lined with sheepskin. The women all take turns touching his cheeks, flicking their fingers lightly over his forehead, gestures meant to confuse any lurking spirits who might be watching, unsure whether the baby is theirs to take. Historians still argue whether these post-birth gatherings were standardized rituals or just regional customs. Some tomb paintings show feasts and musicians after a birth. Others don't mention celebrations at all, but here it's real. Laughter bubbles through the courtyard like it forgot where it's been all this time. One woman brings a harp, a real harp, not particularly in tune, but charming. She plucks out a gentle rhythm while the others begin a slow swaying dance, bare feet and dust hips like reeds in the wind. The baby sleeps through all of it, which is promising. Then comes the lullaby. It's not what you expect. Not a soft shh or a sleepy hum. It's ominous. The words are low and careful, almost like a warning. You catch a few lines: sleep, little one, sleep through the snake's gaze, sleep past the jackal's breath and fire's haze, sleep under Hathor's milk and Taweret's claw, sleep till the Nile forgets what it saw. You look around, no one else finds this odd. Apparently terrifying lullabies are normal here. It's like they want the baby to grow up very alert, or at least develop a healthy fear of jackals. Quirky fact, in some parts of ancient Egypt, people would smear a little mud from the Nile on the baby's heels during the naming ritual, symbolizing their connection to the land and to Ma'at, the order of the universe. One midwife does it now, chuckling, as she gently taps the boy's tiny foot into a bowl of river mud. Now he belongs, she says. Then comes the gift-giving. These aren't silver rattles or plush giraffes. These are practical gifts, small bundles of herbs for colic, a tiny oil lamp carved with the eye of Horus, a clay doll with painted eyes to teach the baby what eyes are apparently, and a folded scrap of linen embroidered with a cobra. To ward off bad dreams, someone explains. Sure. You spot the grandmother tucking a dried lizard tail into a woven pouch next to the baby's blanket. Is that? You start. She nods. Lizards see what we don't. You decide not to ask follow-up questions. The celebration continues for hours despite the heat. The wine flows freely. Someone sings a song about how the child will grow up to be a scribe or a merchant, or possibly a granary inspector, which weirdly gets cheers. One woman toasts to the mother, and to her hips, everyone claps. The mother glows. She leans back against a soft pillow and watches her son sleep, her face content, eyes rimmed with charcoal. For the first time in a long time, no one's holding their breath. And you realize something. This is just as sacred as the bricks and the chants and the bleeding and the sweat. Maybe more so. The birth is only the first part. Welcoming the child, that's what gives the pain purpose. The sun dips lower. Shadows stretch across the courtyard. The baby stirs, hiccups, then returns to sleep. The women begin to clean up brushing petals into piles, folding linens, gathering leftovers for the animals. One last cup of wine is passed around, and someone pours a few drops into the earth for the gods. You sit in the doorway, feet dusty, back sore head, full of too many images. But this moment, this soft laughter, this peaceful sunset, this sleepy baby with a belly full of milk and a future full of unknowns, this finally is what it looks like when birth ends in joy. The hut is quieter now. The baby from yesterday's celebration is nestled beside his mother, finally asleep after a series of hiccups, loud enough to frighten a passing goose. You're sitting nearby watching as the midwife prepares the next step in the newborn's journey, feeding. And not just any feeding. This is where myth, medicine, and mild chaos all swirl into one messy, milk-stained blur. The mother shifts uncomfortably, adjusting her linen wrap as she guides her son to the breast. It's not smooth. He squawks, flails, latches, unlatches, headbutts her in the collarbone, then latches again. You wince in sympathy. The mother sighs. You'd think feeding a baby would be easier than birthing it, she mutters. You don't argue. Breastfeeding in ancient Egypt was considered both sacred and seriously complicated. It wasn't just nourishment, it was cosmic responsibility. The first drops of milk were believed to contain divine protection, and the act itself was associated with the goddess Hathor, who nourished gods and humans alike from her own heavenly breasts. And now here this mother is trying to channel divinity while her newborn gnaws on her like a hungry crocodile. Give it time, the midwife says, handing over a small cup of warm fenugreek tea. For your milk. She says it like she's offering a potion, and maybe she is. Fenugreek and other galactagogues like dates, cumin, and even garlic were commonly used to boost milk production. Whether they worked or not, no one dared skip them. As the baby finally settles into a rhythm, you watch the mother's shoulders ease. The room softens. And then just when things are calm, someone sneezes. Instantly, the midwife slaps a piece of linen over the baby's head and mutters something under her breath. You blink. Was it that bad of a sneeze? No, she says, but now the air is unsettled. Could spoil the milk. Oh, right. Superstition time. In ancient Egypt, bad milk wasn't just a dietary problem, it was a spiritual threat. If a baby cried too often or refused to nurse or got sick while nursing, the milk was often blamed. Not the quality of the food, not germs, the milk itself had become cursed. So naturally, they came up with solutions. First, the milk test. You watch as the midwife takes a drop of express milk and places it into a shallow dish filled with fig leaf juice. If it separates, she says, there's a problem. The mixture stays cloudy, but doesn't split. Good sign. Next, the backup plan, protective amulets. She wraps a cord around the mother's upper arm, this one strung with small charms, an eye of Horus, a carved frog, and a blue glazed bead shaped like a lizard. Quirky fact, lizards were believed to protect against spoiled milk and nursing illnesses. Not exactly the first animal that comes to mind when you think of nursing support, but in Egyptian belief, lizards were mysterious, fast, and difficult to control, like invisible forces that could either help or harm a child. That made them oddly perfect as symbols of milk protection. Another midwife places a Bess figurine near the baby's bed. It's tiny, barely the size of a thumb, but the wild-eyed dwarf god looks ready to fight off an army of milk demons, probably with a drum solo. You ask cautiously, what happens if the baby still won't nurse? Then we try everything else, as one of the women says, already rummaging through a basket. Out comes a soft reed pipette used to feed honey water to newborns too weak or too confused to suckle properly. Then a bit of date paste mixed with goat milk. Not ideal, the midwife says, but better than starving. Wet nurses were also common, though not always available in smaller villages. They were more prevalent in wealthier homes where mothers might avoid breastfeeding for social or ceremonial reasons, or simply because the risk of failure was too high. You've met a few, strong women with broad chests and an almost supernatural calm. They treat milk like currency, and in some ways it is. Historians still debate how formal the wet nursing system was. Was it professionalized or just an informal network of helpful relatives and neighbors? Some tomb paintings show wet nurses holding high-status children. Others show them standing in shadows, unrecorded but essential. Either way, without them, many babies wouldn't make it. Back in the hut, the baby yawns mid-feed, letting go of the nipple with a satisfied sigh. The mother winces and checks for teeth that aren't there yet. He's a biter, she mutters. Everyone laughs because every baby is a biter eventually. You help prepare a warm compress of sesame oil and chamomile to soothe the sore skin. The midwife teaches you how to roll linen into a makeshift nursing pad, tying it around the mother's chest like a lopsided bandolier. Functional, awkward, ancient. A breeze drifts through the doorway. The baby sneezes this time. The midwife pauses, eyes narrowing. That better not be a milk spirit. You're beginning to realize that every single sound a baby makes is an opportunity for interpretation. Is the cry too loud? He's calling the dead. Too soft. He's not fully in his body yet. Hiccups might be joy, might be doom, depends on the day. It's a lot. You start to feel overwhelmed just thinking about it. But then you see the mother smiling now, running her finger along the baby's soft cheek. He nuzzles in closer, content, half dreaming of whatever Nile-born thoughts newborns have. You exhale. Maybe it doesn't all need to make sense. Later, as the midwives clean up and refill the tea, one tells you about a time when a goat wandered into the hut mid-nursing and wouldn't leave. The mother took it as a sign the baby would grow strong and stubborn, she says. She was right. That boy now lifts full grain sacks with one arm and never listens to anyone. You ask, what if a cat walks in? Then the baby's blessed with 9 lives, and if it's a frog, she pauses. Then you give the baby a name that's easy to yell. You laugh, and this time it doesn't feel like a defense mechanism. It feels like a ritual of its own. Because feeding a baby here isn't just about keeping it alive. It's a daily act of faith fending off invisible dangers with milk warmth and just enough superstition to keep the worst from settling in. You've seen birth, you've heard the screams, and you've dodged your fair share of midwife elbows and lizard-based curses. But now you're witnessing something rarer still: recovery. You step into the hut where the mother from 2 days ago is sitting upright, her baby nestled at her breast like a sleepy beetle. The room smells less of blood and more of thyme, mint, and a subtle undercurrent of healing linen. The birth bricks have been removed, the rope taken down, and for the first time in days, there's no chanting. Just rest. She looks tired, sure, but alive. Alive and smiling and definitely aware of how sore every part of her body is. Stitches, you ask one of the midwives gently. She nods. 2, maybe 3. We used flax thread. You blink. Right. No silk, no sterile thread. Just flax softened, twisted, and threaded through a bone or bronze needle. Not pleasant, not optional, and frankly, not something you expected to hear while sipping date tea. Flax was versatile in ancient Egypt, used for clothing wrappings offerings, and apparently delicate post-birth repairs. The midwife says they soak it first in oil, and sometimes wine, which supposedly helps avoid infection. You raise an eyebrow. And does it? She shrugs. Only if the gods are paying attention. The mother winces as she adjusts her sitting pillow. You help her reposition, then hand over a clay pot filled with a warm herbal mash. The midwives call it recovery paste, a blend of fennel cumin and dried fig, supposed to calm the belly and help draw the womb down. That phrase again, draw the womb down. You've heard it in every hut, every birth, a belief as old as the Nile itself that the womb was a mobile thing, an organ with legs. If left unchecked, it might float up into the chest, or worse, wander out altogether. Hence the heated compresses, the binding belts, the oddly specific stretching rituals. One midwife lays a warm pouch across the mother's stomach, a mixture of flax seeds, dried hibiscus, and maybe some leftover breadcrumbs. She calls it belly sleep. You don't ask, you just nod. The baby stirs and squeaks like a mouse. The mother laughs softly and lifts him to feed. Her hand trembles slightly, and you reach out, offering silent support. She doesn't let go of the baby, but her fingers find yours just for a second, just long enough to say, still here. Quirky fact, some women were given ivory womb wands to hold during recovery. Long carved sticks, often depicting protective spirits like Bess or Taweret. They weren't used as tools, but as tokens, a reminder that the danger had passed, that they were whole again or getting there. You're handed one now. It's carved with a dancing dwarf and a line of glyphs that loosely translates to "She who screams returns as she who sings." You trace the letters with your thumb. It feels more like poetry than medicine, but maybe that's the point. The mother tries to laugh, but her ribs ache. My insides feel like mashed barley, she mutters. One of the midwives smirks. That's because your insides are mashed barley. You'll feel better in a week. Then she plops a pillow behind the mother's back with the kind of rough affection you've come to recognize as love. Recovery isn't passive here. It's managed. And not just for the body. The mind matters too. So midwives tell jokes, not just to entertain, but to balance the spirit to help the mother return to herself. Do you know why crocodiles never become midwives? One says, winking. You shake your head. Because their bedside manner is all bite and no balm. The mother snorts, the baby flails in protest, and just like that, the mood shifts from ache to laughter. You help prepare a simple meal, lentils, flatbread, a smear of goat cheese with herbs. It's warm, soft, and comforting. The kind of food that says you made it. The kind of food that tastes like life. She eats slowly between feeds. Her movements are careful, like someone piecing herself back together. Historians still debate what exact postpartum protocols women followed. Some sources mention confinement periods where new mothers stayed indoors for days or weeks to avoid unclean air or wandering spirits. Others argue that the rituals varied wildly by class, region, and even season. But in this village, it's clear recovery is a ritual in itself. The midwives prepare her sleeping space for the night. They lay a strip of linen beneath her, not for bleeding now, but for protection. New mothers are open, one whispers. Too open. We close the door gently. Another sprinkles salt around the bed. You've seen that before, believed to confuse spirits or dehydrate malevolent forces. It's not science, but it feels like something between care and belief. And when you're that fragile, honestly, both matter. You help massage her calves with warmed sesame oil. She hisses at first, then sighs. The tension leaves her feet like steam. She dozes briefly, head lolling. You take the baby just for a while and rock him gently in your arms. He's warm, heavier than you expect, and smells faintly of milk and baked air. You don't say anything, you just rock. Later she wakes and asks if the baby's okay. You nod, still in one piece. And me, she asks. You smile. 2 pieces, but both accounted for. She laughs, then winces, then laughs again. Outside the light is fading. The village buzzes with ordinary life goats, bleeding pots, clinking kids shouting about something irrelevant. But in this little room, time is slow, sacred, and entirely hers. Tonight she won't chant or push or plead with gods. Tonight she'll breathe, eat, sleep, heal, maybe dream. And in the morning, it'll begin again. But she'll be stronger. Not unscarred, but stronger. Because childbirth doesn't end at birth. It ends when a mother can stand, laugh, and say, I'm still here. The sun rises slow and amber, spilling through the reeds like a whisper. You're back in the courtyard, brushing sand from your toes, sipping tea so bitter it could strip paint. But today no one's in labor, no mother is crying, no newborn is wailing like it just got betrayed by the universe. Today is quieter, today is for watching. You follow Heptet, the rattling elder midwife with her charms, her goat-knuckle dice, and the unsettling habit of always knowing when you're about to sneeze. She doesn't say much, just nods toward a home where a toddler has just learned to walk, and promptly fallen. You wince, but no one panics. The mother scoops him up, kisses the top of his head, and checks for bruises. He walks like his grandfather, she says, confident and clumsy. The other women laugh. The child toddles off, again dangerously determined. This isn't just about the first steps. It's about what comes next. The child lives. The mother lives. That in ancient Egypt is a miracle that deserves a closer look. You sit with a group of older women. The air warm, the clay underfoot cracking in the sun. They speak of lineage of daughters who bore sons, of grandmothers who helped birth, 6 generations of families woven together, not by dynasties or pharaohs, but by pain and milk and laughter and small sticky handprints. The stories aren't written on papyrus, they're told out loud, passed over lentils and date wine. My great-grandmother birthed twins while standing, one says, then kept stirring the porridge so it wouldn't burn. You try to laugh, but you're not sure it's a joke. And yet these women, most of whom you've seen elbows deep in childbirth, speak more proudly of their grandchildren than their survival. Not because survival isn't worth celebrating, but because it's the children who carry the proof. Historians still argue whether women in ancient Egypt had much power. Official records favor kings, generals, scribes, names chiseled into stone. But here in the dust power is softer. It's folded into lullabies, kneaded into bread, sewn into the edges of tunics. These mothers built legacies, not with armies but with arms. You follow a girl carrying her baby sister through the fields. She points out the names of herbs mimicking a midwife's voice. This one for pain, this one for bleeding, this one for crying that won't stop. She's 6, and already training. You return to a hut where a newborn snoozes in a woven basket, belly rising and falling with newborn drama. On the wall above, etched with coal, are 3 tiny footprints, one left by a now-grown child, one from the mother herself, and one fresh, still smudged. They'll add more, the mother says softly. If the gods are kind. Outside men pass by with carts of barley and reeds. They nod, they smile, but they don't enter. Not unless invited. They know this space is ruled by different laws. No swords, just rhythm, no shields, just hands. Quirky fact, some women dyed the soles of their babies' feet with henna for protection during the first year. If the gods don't see the real skin, one old woman says maybe they'll leave the baby alone. You glance at the napping infant. His feet are stained rust red. You wonder how many mothers walk through these same paths, bricks in hand, prayers on lips, sweat on backs, hearts and throats. You've lost count already, but you know this much, every one of them was a warrior. Not in the battlefield sense, not in statues or glory, but in the quiet courage of letting their bodies tear and stretch and bleed so something small and sacred could crawl out and cry. That's not a metaphor. That's biology and belief, and frankly something no history scroll could fully honor. The baby stirs. A soft noise escapes. The mother moves without thinking, lifting, cradling, humming a tune, older than this hut, older than the walls, older than you. She's not rich. She won't be written into stone. But she will be remembered, because her daughter will remember her touch, her son will remember her laugh, and maybe one day her great-grandchild will kneel on the same mat and say, "She birthed me into this world and it hurt like the desert sun, but she smiled anyway." You stay until nightfall, watch the stars appear, the same constellations the midwives whispered to during impossible labors, the same skies that judged omens, guided prayers, witnessed loss and survival, and as the final candle flickers in the last birthing room and the village sinks into that dreamy, mosquito-filled silence, you realize you've witnessed something rare. Not just birth, not just survival, but the full circle pain, protection, laughter, legacy. It doesn't need gold, it doesn't need pyramids, just little footprints in clay drying beside a wall. Now let your breathing slow. You're no longer in a village of mud brick and sunlight, no longer kneeling beside hot stones or whispering names into sacred water. The incense fades, the cries soften, the footprints vanish into sand. You lie back now on your own bed, cool and still. Feel the weight leave your shoulders, the long hours spent holding stories that were never yours to carry. The mother's rest, the baby's sleep. The gods for once are quiet. Let your body sink. Let your thoughts loosen like linen unwrapped from a newborn. There is nothing more to fix, nothing to chant, nothing to worry. You did not deliver a child tonight, but maybe you carried something, maybe just the echo of courage, the softness of a lullaby that doesn't rhyme, the memory of hands doing impossible work over and over without applause. You remember the birth brick, sturdy, ordinary, sacred, the chants that looped through pain, the joy that was quiet, and the grief that sat uninvited but never went alone. Let all of that drift now. Let it soften. Let it sleep, because you've made the journey, from sweat and blood to healing and calm. You've walked with women no longer alive but never forgotten. And now you are here, still, whole, quiet,